There, it's Lara here with this week's Witchy Wednesday astrology report for the week of September 26th to October 2nd, 2018. So, we have this week the big event, I guess, is Pluto is moving direct. And so I will spend most of the time in the video addressing that and going through each of the signs and talking about how that will impact you. But before I do that, I want to just mention a couple of other things. And one is that Chiron re entered Pisces on Tuesday, where it's going to stay until February 2019. And in last week's video, I spoke to briefly, I think, about the fact that Chiron was going to do this and that Chiron had been moving through Aries and this transit's going on for about 8 years. And I don't think, though, that I mentioned, you know, why Chiron is going back into Pisces, except to say that it was going back there to sort of clean up any unfinished business. And so before I go any further this week, I just want to say that, when Chiron was transiting Pisces, Chiron, first of all, if you're not familiar, is the planetary body known as the wounded healer in astrology. And so this is wherever Chiron falls in our chart is, excuse me, I'm just recovering from a cold, and I've done several recorded readings today already, so my voice is a little bit tired. Apologies. So what I was saying is wherever Chiron is in our birth chart is an area of life where we have some deep wounding, where we may feel a bit alienated, where we may feel some sense of shame or guilt, where we may have these deep core wounds that ultimately, can never be fully healed. We can do the healing work, and we should, because this can give us superpowers, really, in this area of life, where we can then are better able, rather, to help other people that are experiencing these same issues, right? And it's like growing stronger in the broken places. And I mentioned in last week's video that I have done 2 separate videos on Chiron. One just on Chiron in general, and the other one on Chiron's transit through Aries, that you can find on my channel if you're interested in looking further into that. But so as Chiron transited Pisces for us, over 7 or 8 years, I can't remember the exact amount of time, but it stays longest in Pisces and Aries than it does in any other sign. It has this irregular orbit, right? And so this really drew our attention to our spiritual wounding, largely, and how we feel disconnected from the whole, or disconnected from our higher power, or whatever that means to you on some level, right? So there's wounding around feeling isolated, around feeling alienated, around feeling maybe spiritually bankrupt in some regard. And so depending on how we chose to deal with this this transit, we may have either chosen to do one thing that Pisces is sometimes known for, and that's escape in unhealthy ways, right? Escape the pain. It's just all too much. We can't take feeling all the feels, and so we choose to escape. We don't want to face it. We want to just escape it. And so, there could be, some people may have struggled a lot with addictions and just unhealthy self-sabotaging behaviors over the course of this transit. Or, we may have had some epiphanies, some spiritual epiphanies. There may have been an awakening on some level. And I think, people that are watching astrology videos are familiar with this language of spiritual awakening. And so, that may have been something that occurred for you over this last transit of Chiron through Pisces. And that, when you hear the language of somebody had a spiritual awakening, doesn't that sound fantastic, right? Except those of us who have been through it know otherwise. Usually that is brought on by a dark night of the soul, by having a really crappy go of it, having some really painful things come up for us. And then we get to choose at that point whether we are going to be the victim of those circumstances or the hero. And, later on in the video, when I talk about Pluto moving direct and Pluto in Capricorn, I'm going to circle back to this theme of the hero and the hero's journey a little bit. It's a favorite topic of mine, and so it's a really good metaphor, right? And particularly in this instance. So as Chiron tips back into Pisces, it is asking us to take a look in that area, of our spiritual wounding. And it's saying, okay, are you done here? What else do we need to clean up? What else do we need to take care of? If you didn't do things that you should have done, now's the time, kind of thing, right? Now's the time. So that's Chiron, retrograding in Pisces. And I really wanted to take a minute to talk about that, because I didn't talk about that particular piece last week. So we are just, in other news, coming off the full moon in Aries. The moon is still in Aries right now, and it will move into Taurus tomorrow, which is Thursday, and then Gemini Saturday, and then Cancer on Monday. But we may still feel these lingering full moon energies, right? And whatever came up for us around the full moon, and it wasn't a super necessarily easy full moon, which I mentioned in last week's video. I talked a lot about the full moon in last week's video, so if you want to revisit that, you can go back and check that out. So hopefully you're taking good care of yourself. Aries is in part, at least, about, our physicality. And so at very least, make sure that you're taking the time to look after yourself during this period, and, address any physical needs that you have. And the full moon can be really heightened emotions. And so also very important to take care of our emotional wellness, right? At this time. Anyway, before I start talking about Pluto moving direct in Capricorn, one other thing I wanted to mention to you was that on Thursday the 27th, we're going to have the sun in Libra, because it's Libra season right now, having a conversation with Mars in Aquarius, and it's called a trine. So it's a conversation of flow kind of thing, easier type conversation. But if we're oftentimes if we're not aware of these opportunities, then they pass us by, because it's just not something we notice, because it's not sort of the fly in the ointment causing us to take note and to act. And so having an awareness that there's an opportunity for something is can be helpful. So on Thursday, this is a good supportive aspect for taking action and initiative, getting physically or intellectually kind of active and stimulated, right? Libra is an air sign, and that's about our mind and our thinking. And so we may, and Mars is very much, it's the planet that rules Aries. It's very much about, the physical and being active and action oriented. It's the warrior planet, right? And so we may feel more in connection with our life force around Thursday, and be better able to sort of connect with our vitality, right? And it's a good day for decision making because we can be more decisive. And this is a good thing during Libra season because Libra, the sign of the scales, is known for its ability to see all sides. And this is fantastic, but it can lead to difficulty in decision making because, you know, when you can see all sides, it can be hard to land on what to do about it. So good for decision making around that time. But I think I want to spend the rest of the video talking about Pluto moving direct in Capricorn and at 18 degrees of Capricorn. And so if you, first of all, have a lot of Capricorn energy in your chart, whether you're a Capricorn sun, moon, or rising sign, or if you have a lot of planets or any planets around the 18-degree Capricorn mark, give or take several degrees, or any of the cardinal signs, which are Cancer, Capricorn, Aries, and Libra, then you may feel this shift a little bit more profoundly. So, sorry, my throat's really acting up here, really bugging me. Like I said, I was doing a bunch of readings prior to this recording, and I still do have a bit of a cold. And speaking of that, if you're interested in getting a personal reading for yourself or for somebody else as a gift, then please do reach out. You can connect to me through the link below here in the description box. It will bring you over to my website. You can see what's on offer and how to reach out to me there through email or Facebook or Instagram. And while I'm on the subject, if you have not yet subscribed to the channel and you're finding this video interesting and something that resonates with you, then please click the subscribe button. I would really appreciate if you stuck around and came back for more. All right, so Pluto is moving direct in Capricorn at 18 degrees. I'm going to show you the chart right now, and then I'll go into more detail about that. So here's the chart that I drew up for today. And we can see there's the sun in Libra, and Mercury's in Libra too. And there is Pluto up in Capricorn. And you can see right there, that's the sign telling us it's a little RX, right? And that means that Pluto is retrograde. But as of the 2nd of October, Pluto will move direct, and so we won't see that there anymore on the chart. And Pluto is traveling through Capricorn with Saturn. And that's asteroid Vesta, which I spoke to in a previous video. So all things sort of Capricorn are going through this phase of deep structural transformation. I'm talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And I've spoken to that in previous videos, most notably earlier in the year when these shifts all started happening. What else do I want to show you here? There's Chiron, right, which I was talking about, that just tipped out of Aries and back into Pisces there. So it's at the very later degrees of Pisces. And there is a lot of activity happening here up in Aquarius, where we have Mars in Aquarius. Remember I said it was making that trine conversation tomorrow with Mercury in Libra. And then we also have the South Node. And the South Node is about our past. And then we have Black Moon Lilith here. And these are all meeting up in Aquarius. Let me just take a brief little second to talk about that. Other astrologers have spoken to this a little bit more at length. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but I think it's good to note. The South Node is about our past. You know, it's about what we are so well versed in that it's our default. It's our comfort zone, even if it's not that comfortable. You know, what we're used to, what we've had so much experience in, you know, been there, done that kind of thing. That we're sort of masters in that area, but we're being called to move away from our South Node and towards our North Node. And embrace the energies of our North Node. And of course, that's in each of our individual charts. We have our South Node and North Node in different, you know, places. But collectively, right now for us, the South Node is in Aquarius and has been for about, if I recall, a year and a half-ish kind of thing. And so it's meeting up with Mars, right? This masculine planet of action and will and drive and instinct. And also with Black Moon Lilith, who you haven't heard me talk about too much, but she is very primal energy, and ultimately like the primal feminine, really. The dark goddess, she is known as. And you know, I've heard her referred to as sort of like the, you know, the woman scorned kind of thing. And so I think it's interesting to bring this up. The sign of Aquarius is the sign of the collective. It's the sign of rebellion and the sign of where we are unique, our place in the group too, right? It's Aquarius looks at things from a bit of a detached point or viewpoint. And Aquarius also is associated with, because it's ruled by the planet Uranus, with trauma and collective trauma and ancestral trauma on some level. And so, you know, I just think what's going on there in Aquarius with Mars and Lilith and the South Node is really speaking to so many themes that we see playing out. This is also in line with what you're going to hear me talk about in terms of Pluto and Saturn and Capricorn. We're seeing this call to return of balance between the masculine and feminine. And I spoke about this, I believe it was the first video I did for the new year, that this was going to be a theme over the next while. And we can see this playing out. And when I say masculine and feminine, I don't necessarily mean men and women, although that's pretty obvious, you know, in the world right now with many things that are going on. But I mean on an energetic level, right? In a divine way, even within ourselves, the call to balance the masculine and feminine, and to call back the pieces of ourselves that we have, you know, perhaps buried or ignored, or are ashamed of in some way, whether they be associated with masculine qualities or feminine qualities, which we all have inside of us, regardless of our, you know, our gender, how we identify. That has nothing to do with what I'm talking about here. And so it's interesting to note that. Okay. I said more about that than I intended, but wanted to come out. So next thing I want to do is now spend the remainder of the time speaking to Pluto in Capricorn, moving direct, and how it's going to impact each of us, right? So first of all, collectively, and I want to keep an eye on the time, so I don't run out of time to go through all the signs. But, Pluto has been retrograde for over 5 months. It goes retrograde every year, so that's nothing new. But it stays in each sign for not a standard length of time because its orbit is irregular, and so it's making this transition through Capricorn for about 16 years all told. It moved in there in 2008, and it will be there until 2024, so 16 years, right? And sometimes it stays in a particular sign like anywhere from like 13ish years to 30 years. It sort of depends. So this particular transit is about 16 years long. And at other points in history when Pluto was transiting Capricorn, was the American Revolution, right? Which ultimately, spawned the Declaration of Independence in the U.S. and the Industrial Revolution was another Pluto and Capricorn period. The Dark Ages were Pluto and Capricorn period, and so Pluto is in Capricorn ultimately to transform our systems, our structures, um, you know, our government, big business, finance, corporations, our infrastructure, our hierarchies, the patriarchy, um, how we deal with aging falls into this category too, and what it means ultimately to be a responsible citizen, right? Capricorn fears losing control. And we can see this backlash, right? And the clinging to the status quo, um, and clinging to power. We can see this going on in the world in many cases. As Pluto comes in and plumbs the depths and calls for, um, tearing down societal structures that are no longer serving us, right? And building a solid foundation from which to grow on. Pluto doesn't care about status. Pluto wants to get to the bottom of things and wants to uncover the secrets and take the skeletons out of the closet, and wants us to not be fearful to look in the dark corners. And it's, wants to go in there and just really tear it down so it can be rebuilt. Pluto rules Scorpio. And Scorpio, one of the symbols for Scorpio is the phoenix rising from the ashes. And so we can, if we sort of tune into that symbol, this is what ultimately Pluto is asking of us wherever it sits in our chart, personally, but collectively right now as it moves through the sign of Capricorn, it is looking to really, really overhaul things, right? And take no prisoners kind of thing. And there may be some clinging to power. There will be issues inevitably of power and control. That's a Pluto theme as well. And ultimately, we are being called to take back our power where we have given it away, or if we have abused power in some way, we are being called out for that. And so Pluto wants us to take radical responsibility, for our actions, past and present, and it wants us to tear down what structures are no longer serving us, right? So wherever Pluto is in our own personal chart, we're on this journey of deep transformation over in this lifetime. But right now, Pluto is traveling through Capricorn, and each of us has Capricorn in a certain area of our chart, in a certain house. So when we look to the area of our chart that Capricorn sits, right, we see where Pluto is currently making this transformational journey. From 2008, so if we look back, if we look back to 2008, we might see like where did some really deep stuff start to go on for us, right? Some really powerful transformations start to take place. And this transit will keep happening in this area of our chart until 2024. So this is where Pluto is asking us to go deep, to be real, to face our fears, to release our skeletons from the closet, to be vulnerable, to act with the utmost integrity, to take back our power, or to relinquish power where we have abused it. All right, so a quote came to mind as I was thinking about this. And I mentioned to you, at the top of the video, I was talking about the hero's journey and Joseph Campbell, the mythologist. And there's a quote by him: "The cave we fear to enter holds the treasure we seek." And so as I move through each of the signs here and I talk about Pluto moving direct, I want you to keep that imagery in mind, right? Pluto wants us to enter that cave that we may be fearful to enter, but ultimately doing that will allow us to find the treasure in there, right? In the dark, dank, cobwebby, scary places. And so as Pluto's been retrograde, we may have been in whatever area of life it sits for us, which I'll get to in a second. There may have been some very deep internal processes going on. And now, as Pluto moves direct, we may start to see the outward manifestation of this, or we may start to take the action of taking back our power externally, or rebalancing the power in some way, or making the transformation, telling the secrets, coming to terms with the secrets, really having the courage to dive into the unknown. So, beginning with Capricorn, because this is happening in your first house. Excuse me. Cap. And this is Capricorn rising, and also relevant for Capricorn sun and Capricorn moon, or if you have a lot of planets in Capricorn. Specifically, I don't think I mentioned this, it's moving direct at 18 degrees. So if you have any planets or points specifically around the 18-degree Capricorn mark, or around 18 degrees of any of the cardinal signs, which is Capricorn, Cancer, Aries, and Libra, then you may feel this a little more profoundly, this shift of Capricorn direct. But Pluto, not Capricorn direct, Pluto direct. Pluto doesn't move all that quickly, right? So it's not necessarily something that happens like that. It's a slow transformation, but as it moves forward, we may get this taking of the next step, this feeling of the next shift kind of thing. All right, so Capricorn, first house this is happening in for you, and that's the house of the self. And so there can be this major overhaul going on for you, right? In terms of how you come across to the outside world, how you present to the outside world. Even your physical appearance perhaps could be up for some transformation. But how you are viewed by the outside world. And um, like the impression that you make on the outside world even falls into this house. Your sort of your instincts and your initial, drives, your instinctual drives. um, and so this can all be sort of in this process of uh, of change, of deep change, though, with Pluto being in that area of the chart for you. And so you may be sensing this on some level, or you may have been thinking about these things, contemplating them at a deep psychological level, and now are maybe ready to take some external action towards that. All right, Sagittarius, this is happening in your second house of your resources, um, your material resources, your finances, your valuables, what you value. And I don't just mean when I'm talking about what you value, that could be material things, but it could be just, our general values as well. What's important to us, right? Also, our self worth and how we use the skills and talents we possess to um, make ourselves secure in the world. And so, Sag, this area of life is under review for you. Deep transformation wants to happen here, right? Again, that imagery of the phoenix rising from the ashes. Um, this is a time when you are being asked and called to not be afraid to go there in this area of life and to do the work, and to enter that, that cave, to find the treasures, so to speak. And so maybe you need maybe there's some major change that wants to happen in this area, and you really have been fearful of that, or there have been some power struggles in this area of life, and it's time to right those. All right, Scorpio, this is happening in your third house of your communications and the messages that are exchanged on a day to day, and your way of communicating, and your way of, your thinking, your thoughts. Also has to do with your community, your neighbors, your siblings, your cousins, that kind of thing falls into this category. And again, so perhaps there are some major changes going on, and maybe perhaps under the surface this has been going on for a while, and then you're going to see this manifest externally, or be called to take the action externally, that you've been contemplating, um, in terms of your communication or your thought processes, that kind of thing. um, Libra, this is happening in your fourth house. And this has to do, Libra, with a deep transformation that's occurring, or wants to occur, or seeking of balance, between like a power balance in the area of life that has to do with your home, your place of living, your family, your ancestry, um, your emotional security, your the archetypal mother energy, and so there may, have been a lot going on under the surface in this regard, and maybe some things that you've even been potentially sort of fearful of, or even, unconscious of in some way. And now it's a time to that those things will come sort of to the surface and out in the open, and you can better perhaps see them in the light of day, right? And deal with them, or take the steps, the outward steps towards transforming that area of life in some way. Virgo, this is happening in your 5th house of your creative pursuits, your creative self-expression, your inner child, children in general, your own children, children you work with, and how you find pleasure in life. So, there could have been some feelings of powerlessness in this area of life, or perhaps, abusive power. These themes could have been playing out for you on an internal level too. Thinking deeply about how this area of life needs to be transformed. And now, with Pluto moving direct, perhaps this is coming more to the surface and more out in the open, and more, you are ready to kind of deal with that, and see the next shift happen in that area of life. Leo, this is happening in your 6th house of your daily affairs, of your day-to-day tasks and routines, of your health and wellness routines, of how you are in service to others on the day-to-day. And you may have been thinking a lot about how this area of life may need an overhaul. There may have been some fear going on there about what those changes might look like, or feeling that there's a lack of control in some way in those areas of life. And so now, again, Pluto's moving direct, right, for the next 6 months or so, and now's the time to take back the power in that area, or to reestablish the balance of power in that area, and not be afraid to take on whatever needs to be transformed in that area of life. Cancer, this is happening in your 7th house of your one-on-one relationships. And so maybe you've been really contemplating, that there are some changes that need to happen in your relationships, in your close personal relationships. Things need to be transformed, and maybe you've been sort of even coming to terms with the fact that there is an imbalance of power in this area of life and certain relationships. And so, you've sort of gone there internally, and now it can be the time to have the courage to take those things out in the open, to bring certain things out in the open, to have the transformative discussions, or allow what wants to transform to do so. Gemini, this is happening in your 8th house. And Pluto is at home in the 8th house. It's a comfortable place for Pluto, because the 8th house is all about the things we don't necessarily want others to see. It's about our deep, intimate connections. And it's about how we share resources with others, our shared resources. And it's about our deep psychological, attachments and processes. And so on some level, Pluto is there for you to transform this area of life and to reestablish the balance of power there. And so, think about how this might be playing out for you. And are there things that have been bubbling under the surface that now need to be brought to the light of day, right? So that's for you, Gemini. And moving on to Taurus. Taurus, this is happening in your ninth house of higher learning and your world, excuse me, your worldview and your it's like teaching and learning falls into this house too, or how we can expand our horizons through other cultures or things that are not known to us, different, people from different places, different concepts and worldviews, that kind of thing. It's about our seeking of the truth, right? And so this area of life has been going through deep transformation since 2008 for you, Taurus, and is continuing to do so. But with Pluto in retrograde over these last 5 months, that can be, has been a very internal process. And now some things that you've been contemplating and working with internally may now start to manifest externally, right? So Aries, this is happening in your 10th house of your public persona, of your career, of your reputation and your status. And, again, since 2008, this area of life has been up for review in terms of, on a very deep level. There may have been some imbalance of power in this area for you. There may have been some secrets even harbored in this area. There may have been just some transformation being called for. And so maybe over the last 5 months or so, you've been really thinking about this, and things have been going, on an internal level in regards to those 10th house themes, and now are going to start, shifting externally for the next while. All right, 2 more signs. Pisces, this is happening for you in your 11th house of the groups that you're associated with, your groups of friends and associations, organizations, and that goes for like online groups as well in this day and age. Also, any sort of humanitarian pursuits, or also your visions for the future kind of thing. And so this is Pisces, the area of life that's being called to be transformed in a very deep, meaningful way, right? And over these last 5 months, you may have been thinking about this. These things may have been bubbling up from your, these themes may have been bubbling up from the unconscious, and now are ready to see the light of day and, take steps towards perhaps transforming them on an external level, if that makes sense. Aquarius, this is happening in your 12th house. Last but not least here, Aquarius, and wow. So Aquarius, this is maybe coming to terms with how you may have been sabotaging yourself, escapist behaviors, this feeling of connection or disconnection, feeling alienated from your higher power, right? I was talking about this with the because this is the house of Pisces. But there's just what's going on for you here with this energy is very, very deep on a soulful level. It may be these things like we're not even necessarily conscious of where we are sabotaging ourselves, and you're being called to take a good, deep, long look at that, and to really go about the business of transforming, right? And thankfully, with Pluto and Capricorn for so long, this doesn't have to be an overnight thing, but it's a theme that's playing out for you for um, the next while until about 2024. So those are the 12 signs. I felt like that was a bit of a rush job. I only have so much time here. And when we're talking about Pluto energy, oh, there's so much to be said, right? It's complicated. It's very complex energy. And so it's hard to just do these sound bites, but hopefully that gives you some indication of where you might be feeling this in your own personal chart and where we might be seeing this play out collectively for us. So with that, I'm going to leave you for this week. Take good care, and I will be back next week. And don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment. I really do appreciate it. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.